My mother always defended my older brother, but when he stole my younger brother's fiancée, our family shattered into pieces that could never be mended. My mother, Linda, expects me and my brothers to overlook the devastating fact that our cunning golden child, older brother, betrayed our younger brother in the cruelest way possible. I never imagined our once tight family would crumble like this. A year ago, I would have laughed in disbelief if someone had predicted that my elder brother Caleb would commit such a heinous act of betrayal. Linda, our mother, has always portrayed Caleb as the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the perfect son who excelled at everything. However, as I sit here in my dimly lit apartment, haunted by the nightmare that unfolded just weeks ago, I can't help but replay how we arrived at this point of no return. Logan's wedding, or what was meant to be Logan's wedding, was where it all began to unravel. Logan, my younger brother, is the most genuine soul I've ever known. He's a gentle, compassionate man who would give you his last dollar without a second thought. We were all overjoyed when he proposed to Avery. She seemed to love Logan with the same intensity he loved her. Intelligent, witty, and seemingly perfect for him. They were one of those couples that radiated happiness, the kind you look at and think, they're meant to be. And then there was Caleb. Even now, the details feel like a bitter pill stuck in my throat. One week, Logan and Avery were choosing flowers and finalizing their guest list. The next, Avery was canceling the wedding. Logan appeared at my door completely broken, a sight I'll never forget. His eyes were red-rimmed from endless tears, his face ashen with grief. He told me Avery had ended things, offering no explanation beyond saying she couldn't go through with it. Initially, I thought it might be cold feet. It happens, right? Weddings are stressful events that can overwhelm anyone. But then the truth exploded in our faces like a grenade. Avery and Caleb, who was supposed to be Logan's best man, showed up together at a family barbecue less than 3 days later. We had all been summoned for family time by Mom. I wanted to check on Logan, whom I hadn't seen since his heartbreaking appearance at my door. The image of Caleb sauntering into the backyard, holding Avery's hand as if flaunting a trophy, is forever branded in my memory. The entire yard fell into a deafening silence, as if someone had pressed pause on reality itself. As I struggled to process the surreal scene before me, my eyes darted between Avery and Caleb, desperately searching for any sign of remorse. What in God's name is this? I demanded, my voice cutting through the thick silence like a knife. Caleb, wearing his trademark smug smile, the one that had always made my blood boil, merely shrugged as if he were discussing the weather. Avery and I are together now, he declared with casual cruelty. Thankfully, Logan wasn't present, but my sister Riley's reaction spoke volumes. The pitcher of lemonade slipped from her trembling hands, shattering across the patio in a spray of glass and yellow liquid. I studied my mother's expression, and what I saw chilled me to the bone. There wasn't a hint of shock in her eyes. That was the first warning sign. Linda had known. She had known and warned no one. You're kidding, I choked out, my voice quivering with barely contained rage. Avery refused to meet my gaze, her face flushed with guilt as she stared intently at the grass beneath her feet. I've always despised Caleb's calm-down expression since childhood, and now he wore it like armor as he spoke in that infuriatingly casual tone. It's complicated, Mason, but this is for the best. Everyone will be better off this way. I lost it then, my fury erupting like a volcano that had been dormant for far too long. How about Logan? I snarled, taking a menacing step forward. You just stole your brother's fiancée. How exactly is he better off? The word stole made Avery flinch visibly, but Caleb remained unmoved, his composure as practiced as a politician's. Her relationship with Logan wasn't working out, he stated matter-of-factly. This wasn't planned, it just dashed. I didn't let him finish, my rage making it impossible to even look at him. Save your excuses, I spat, turning on my heel and storming toward the house. Riley followed close behind, her face a mirror of my own disgust. Did you see, Mom? She whispered once we were in the kitchen, her voice trembling with disbelief. She didn't say a word. She just stood there like this was perfectly normal. That was the second warning sign. Caleb had always held a special place in Linda's heart. As the eldest, he'd made the family proud with his prestigious corporate career and his Ivy League degree. Logan and I were just the spares, the backup children who could never quite measure up. I used to joke about us being the family's spare parts, but suddenly it didn't seem funny anymore. I called Logan that evening, my heart heavy with the burden of what I had to tell him. Did you know? I asked softly. About Avery and Caleb? His response was hollow, devoid of any emotion. No, he said quietly. But of course it was Caleb. It's always Caleb. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Riley completely severed all contact with Caleb, and my attempt to confront him again was met with dismissive waves and claims that I was being dramatic. A few days later, my mother called, her voice unnaturally serene. Mason, we need to talk, she said, as if she were arranging a casual coffee date. About what? I demanded, still seething over Caleb and Avery's betrayal. We're having dinner at the house this weekend. You and Riley should come. It's time to put this behind us. I thought I must have misheard her. Put this behind us? I echoed incredulously. Logan was betrayed by Avery, his heart was shattered, and Caleb dash. I know it's difficult, she interrupted gently, but Caleb is still your brother. Despite his mistake, he's happy now. Isn't that what matters? I was speechless. My mother, who was supposed to protect all of her children equally, was once again taking Caleb's side, trying to sweep his betrayal under the rug like so many times before. When I told Riley about the dinner invitation, she let out a bitter laugh. Are you serious? She's trying to normalize this? She scoffed, shaking her head in disbelief. I couldn't disagree, but I felt compelled to go. Not for my mother or Caleb, but for Logan. I needed him to know he still had allies in this family war. When I arrived at my parents' house that Saturday evening, the tension was already thick enough to choke on. Riley was waiting on the porch, arms crossed tightly across her chest. This is going to be a disaster, she muttered as I approached. I couldn't bring myself to argue. The scene inside was like something from a twisted parallel universe. Caleb sat at the dining table, smiling as if he hadn't just torn our family apart. Avery was there too, perched beside him like she belonged, while our mother Linda beamed from the head of the table as if nothing was amiss. Come sit down, she chirped with forced cheerfulness. We're going to have a nice family dinner. Riley and I exchanged glances, the air so heavy with tension I could barely breathe. But as soon as I sat down, all hell broke loose. I didn't want to be there, truthfully. I wanted to flip the table and walk away. But someone had to speak for Logan, who wasn't there. Someone had to say what everyone else was too cowardly to acknowledge. Linda stood at the head of the table, her smile as pristine as the perfectly arranged place settings, as if she believed her cooking could somehow mend this catastrophe. Let's just sit down and have a nice meal together, she suggested, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I'd rather eat glass, Riley muttered under her breath, and I couldn't help but agree. Caleb and Avery were seated at the far end of the table, and the sight of them together still made my stomach turn. Caleb had one arm draped possessively over the back of her chair, as if they were on some twisted date night. Avery, however, couldn't seem to look at either Riley or me, keeping her head down and staring at her plate as if the mashed potatoes held the secrets of the universe. Where's Logan? I asked, my voice cutting through the artificial pleasantries like a blade. Linda shot me one of her patented, "You're ruining this" looks. Logan chose not to come, Riley answered for her, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Yeah, no kidding. Wonder why. Linda gave her a stern look, but remained tellingly silent. She probably knew Riley wouldn't back down. My sister has always been the firecracker of the family. Even though she's only 2 years younger than me, she's never been afraid to speak her mind, especially when it comes to Caleb. I watched as Caleb buttered a roll with meticulous precision, as if he hadn't just detonated a nuclear bomb in our family. So Caleb, I said, my voice deceptively calm, you're just okay with all of this? He looked up at me with that infuriating calm-down expression he'd been giving me since we were kids, the one that always made me feel like he thought he was superior, smarter, older. What do you mean by that, Mason? This. I gestured between him and Avery, my voice rising with each word. You stole Logan's fiancée. The same Logan who asked you to be his best man because he trusted you. Are you seriously going to sit there and act like this is normal? Caleb sighed heavily, setting down his butter knife, as if I were being the unreasonable one. Look, Mason, this wasn't planned. Avery and I. It just happened. Things just happen sometimes. Riley leaned forward in her chair, her laugh sharp and bitter. That's your excuse? Things don't just happen, to include dating your brother's fiancée. Avery flinched at Riley's words, but still didn't raise her head. I wished she would stand up for herself, say something, anything, but she just sat there, letting Caleb speak for her. At last, showing a crack in his composure, Caleb ran his fingers through his hair. I'm not going to sit here and let the two of you attack us, he declared. Avery and I have been honest about our feelings. We're happy together, and we don't need your blessing. Honest. I fired back, my voice rising. You think what you did to Logan was honest? You didn't even have the guts to tell him yourself. You let Avery do your dirty work when she called off the wedding. That's enough. Linda's voice rang out across the table. Mom fixed me with that familiar look of disapproval, the same one she'd given me whenever I dared to talk back as a child. We are not going to spend this dinner shouting at each other like children. Riley pushed her plate away with disgust. Then maybe Caleb shouldn't have acted like one. Riley, please. Linda's voice was strained. This isn't helping. The reason Caleb and Avery are here is to move forward as a family. We all need to forgive and move past this. Forgive and move past this? I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. You're just okay with what Caleb did to Logan. Linda's expression softened, as if she were speaking to a small child who just couldn't understand the complexities of the adult world. Life is complicated, Mason. People make mistakes, but they deserve the chance to be happy. Happy. Riley's fist slammed onto the table. Logan is miserable, Mom. You're acting like none of this matters, like we're at some normal family dinner, like it's Thanksgiving or something. Caleb stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You know what? I don't have to sit here and be attacked in my own home. Sit down. My voice came out low and menacing, surprising even me. I was so tired of Caleb walking away from everything, responsibility, consequences, Logan. You don't get to waltz in here with Avery like nothing happened and then act like we're the problem. Finally, Avery spoke up, her voice trembling and barely above a whisper. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I turned to her, and so did Riley. Then why did it? I demanded, my anger mixing with incredulity. Avery glanced at Caleb, as if seeking permission to speak. When he remained silent, she took a deep breath. Caleb and we started talking months ago. At first, it was innocent, but she paused, her voice catching. He told me things about Logan. Things that made me doubt everything. What things? Riley pressed, her voice sharp as a razor. Avery stumbled over her words. He said Logan didn't really love me. That he was just going through the motions because he felt pressured to settle down. Caleb. I froze as everything clicked into place. For months, Caleb had been planting seeds of doubt in Avery's mind. This was classic Caleb. Charming, manipulative, and utterly self-serving. You've got to be kidding me, Riley spat, disgust dripping from every word. You let Caleb convince you Logan didn't love you? Logan adored you, Avery. Everyone could see it. Avery winced, but Caleb stepped in front of her, his voice turning cold. We're not going to sit here and let you two attack Avery. This conversation is over. Fine. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Then I guess I'll have this conversation with Logan instead. I'm sure he'll love hearing how his own brother was working behind the scenes to sabotage his relationship. Linda began, but I cut her off. I'm done, I announced, turning to leave. Riley followed close behind me. Logan deserves better than this, Mom. And if you can't see that, then I don't know what to tell you. As soon as the front door closed behind us, Riley let out a breath she'd obviously been holding. Unbelievable, she muttered. Caleb's not even sorry. He believes his own lies. I didn't respond. What Avery had revealed about Caleb getting into her head and manipulating her emotions had my mind spinning. This wasn't some spontaneous romance. Caleb had been orchestrating this for months, and for some unfathomable reason, Linda was choosing to ignore that fact. Riley turned to me as we got into her car. We have to tell Logan. I know, I replied grimly. But I don't think this ends here. And I was right, it didn't. Riley's engine hummed through the silent drive to Logan's place. Neither of us spoke, both lost in the same haunting thought. How were we going to explain this to Logan? Learning that Avery had called off the wedding was one thing, but discovering that Caleb had been manipulating her for months? That was an entirely different beast. I half expected Logan not to answer when we arrived at his apartment. He'd been practically a ghost since the breakup, responding only to occasional texts. But the door creaked open slowly, revealing Logan's gaunt face, dark circles shadowing his eyes. He looked thinner, as if he hadn't been eating. Hey, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Didn't expect to see you guys tonight. Can we come in? I asked gently. After a moment's hesitation, Logan stepped aside. The apartment looked as defeated as he did, curtains drawn against the world, the couch clearly serving as his bed these days, takeout containers creating a small city on the coffee table. Logan let out a humorless laugh when he caught me looking. Yeah, I know it's a mess, he muttered, sweeping some papers off the cushions. Have a seat. Riley and I sat on the couch while Logan remained standing, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed protectively across his chest. He looked guarded, as if he already knew we weren't just stopping by for a casual visit. What's up? He finally asked, his eyes darting between us. Riley didn't waste time. Logan, we need to tell you something about Caleb. Logan stiffened at the mere mention of Caleb's name, his jaw clenching visibly. I don't want to talk about him. You need to hear this, I said quietly. It's about what really happened with Avery. Logan flinched at her name, but after letting out a shaky breath, he sank into the armchair across from us. Fine, he said flatly. Say whatever you came here to say. I didn't mince words. Logan deserved the unvarnished truth. Avery told us tonight that Caleb had been talking to her for months. He was telling her things that made her believe you didn't really love her. At first, Logan's expression didn't change. He sat perfectly still, staring at me, and I wasn't even sure he'd heard me. Then slowly, he looked away, his fists clenching against his thighs. So, he whispered, Caleb convinced her to leave me. Manipulated her, Riley added fiercely. He got in her head, Logan. She said he made her think you were just settling for her, because dash. Logan let out a bitter laugh that held no trace of humor. Of course he did. That's Caleb. He's always been good at taking things that don't belong to him. I was taken aback by the venom in his voice. Logan had always been our family's steady anchor. If Riley was the firecracker and I was the perpetual middle child caught between sides, Logan was the quiet one. He didn't get angry. He just got sad. But now there was rage in his eyes. He's done this before, Logan stated abruptly, staring at the floor. What do you mean? Riley asked, trying to piece things together. Logan's expression darkened as he looked up. You really think this is the first time Caleb has taken something that was rightfully mine? Remember my high school soccer tryouts? Logan asked, and I frowned, trying to recall. Yeah, you didn't make the team. No, Logan said with a bitter smile. I did make it. But Caleb convinced the coach I was unreliable, that he'd be a better choice. I didn't find out for years that while Caleb made varsity, I was cut. What? Riley's eyes widened. Why didn't you say anything? Because who would have believed me? Logan shrugged. Caleb's always been the golden one. The perfect son. Caleb can do no wrong. Something clicked in my mind then. For years, Caleb had been our mother's world, charming, ambitious, self-assured, everything a perfect eldest son should be. But now that the cracks were showing, it became clear that he didn't just take things because he wanted them. He did it to win, to prove he was better than the rest of us. Logan, I said slowly, why do you think he did this to Avery now? Logan gave me a look of weary understanding. Because he could. I've always made Caleb jealous. He hides it well, like he hides everything else. When he saw how happy I was with Avery, I think he decided to take that away too. Logan was right. This wasn't just about Avery. It was about Caleb's pathological need to prove he was the best, no matter who he hurt in the process. There was a moment of heavy silence. Riley looked like she wanted to punch a wall, and I felt sick to my stomach. Logan wiped his face with his hands and said quietly, You know what's the worst part? I loved her. I really did. And I trusted Caleb. I thought he was happy for me. I'm sorry, I muttered, knowing how hollow it sounded. Don't apologize to me, Logan said, shaking his head. Just tell me what you're going to do about it. Riley grimaced. What do you mean? Logan's voice was hard. I mean, Caleb isn't done. You think he's just going to stop after this? Mom's already on his side. I'm the bad guy for not letting it go. But he'll keep spinning things until the rest of the family forgives him too. That's how he operates. Riley and I exchanged glances. Logan was right. Our mother was already setting the stage for us to move past this, and if we didn't do something, Caleb would win. Just like he always did. We need to talk to Mom, Riley said firmly. Make her see what's really going on. She can't keep defending him. Good luck with that, Logan snorted. Mom will defend Caleb until the day she dies. I didn't want to believe that, but deep down, I knew Logan wasn't wrong. One thing was clear to me though, as I watched my younger brother sit in his damaged apartment, Caleb wasn't going to get away with this. Not this time. We're not letting him win this time, I stated firmly. Logan looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Good, because I'm tired of being Caleb's punching bag. As Riley and I left Logan's apartment that evening, I felt something shift inside me. I was done being nice, done letting Caleb bully everyone while Linda applauded him. It was time to confront Caleb head-on, and this time, I wasn't going to hold back. Riley and I quickly decided what needed to happen next. Caleb needed to be confronted, really confronted, and not just about Avery. This was about everything Caleb had been doing for years, manipulating people, twisting situations, making himself look like the perfect son while stepping on the rest of us. Logan was right. Caleb wouldn't stop unless someone forced him to, and we were going to force him. When Riley and I showed up unannounced at our parents' house the next morning, Linda opened the door looking startled to see us, and as if she hadn't slept all night. Good. Mason Riley, she said, her smile forced. What are you doing here? We need to talk to Caleb, I said, brushing past her into the living room, Riley trailing behind me. Linda sighed deeply as she shut the door. This again. Can't you just dash? No, Mom, we can't, Riley interrupted, turning to stare at her. Is Caleb here? Linda hesitated, then nodded. He's upstairs, but I don't think dash. Perfect, I muttered, heading for the stairs. Mason, don't start anything. Linda called after me, but I ignored her. Linda had let Caleb get away with too much for too long, and it was time for someone to do what she wouldn't. We found Caleb in his old bedroom, the door half open, sitting on his bed with his laptop open. When he looked up and saw us, his face twisted into a mixture of smugness and annoyance. To what do I owe this pleasure? Caleb drawled, leaning back against the wall and closing his laptop. Here to lecture me some more? I crossed my arms. We're here for answers, not lectures. I've already explained everything, Caleb said, rolling his eyes. I didn't plan this with Avery. It just happened. Why can't you all accept that and move on? Because it's a lie, Riley snapped. Avery told us you'd been getting in her head for months. You were sabotaging her relationship with Logan the whole time. Even as Caleb's face reddened, his smug look persisted. So what? Relationships end all the time. It's not my fault if Logan couldn't keep her. You think this is a game, don't you? I said, my fists clenching at my sides as I stepped toward him. You're not even sorry for what you did. Why should I be? Caleb retorted. Logan was never right for Avery. I did her a favor. You took her. Riley shouted. You can't stand seeing other people happy, so you manipulated her into leaving Logan. Watch it, Riley, Caleb said, getting to his feet, his face turning icier. No, we know exactly what we're talking about, Caleb, I said quietly. You've been doing this for years. Stealing from Logan, undermining him, playing the golden child while the rest of us suffer. You're being dramatic, Caleb smirked. Are we? Logan told us about the soccer team. How you convinced the coach to cut him so you could take his place. I shot back. Ring any bells? For a moment, Caleb's smirk wavered, but he recovered quickly. That was years ago. Who cares? Logan cares, Riley yelled. Just like you ruined this for him, you ruined that. Caleb laughed, but it was a mocking, bitter sound. You guys are unbelievable, he said. You think I'm the bad guy. Logan is pathetic. He always has been. He lets people walk all over him because he's weak. Avery chose me because I'm better than him. I didn't steal her dash. Riley stepped forward and jabbed a finger at Caleb's chest. You're not better than anyone, Caleb. The only reason you get away with being a manipulator and a liar is because Mom lets you. Leave Mom out of this, Caleb snarled. Why? Riley retorted. We all know you're her favorite. She'll defend you no matter what you do. Linda suddenly appeared in the doorway. What is going on in here? She demanded, her voice sharp. Riley turned to face her. Ask your perfect son. He just admitted to manipulating Avery into leaving Logan. Linda's face went white as she turned to Caleb. Is that true? Of course not, Caleb said softly, his voice honey smooth. Mom, they're twisting what I said, dash. You said Avery chose you because you're better than Logan. Riley shouted. You're proud of what you did. Linda's expression was unreadable as she looked at Caleb, who gave her his practiced, innocent look, the one he'd always used to get out of trouble. Come on, Mom, you know me, he said. I would never do something like that. For a moment, I hoped Linda would finally see Caleb for who he truly was. But she hesitated, and I could see the doubt in her eyes. Then, as always, she folded. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, she said, her voice strained. We're not going to solve anything by yelling. Riley laughed bitterly. Unbelievable. You're still protecting him. I'm not protecting anyone, Linda protested. But I'm not going to let this family fall apart over a relationship that didn't work out. This family is already falling apart, I said quietly. And it's because of Caleb. Caleb looked bored. Cry about it, he shrugged. We're done, Riley snapped. We're done with you. What's that supposed to mean? Caleb said, looking truly shaken for the first time. It means Logan's done, I said. Riley's done. I'm done. You're on your own. You can't just cut me out of the family, Caleb said, looking truly shaken for the first time. Watch us, Riley said icily. Mom, you can pretend Caleb is perfect all you want, but the rest of us aren't playing along anymore. I turned to Linda, who looked stunned. Either you're with us, or you're with him. Your choice. Linda gave me a slapped look. You can't ask me to choose. You already have, Riley said softly. You just don't realize it. I think Caleb finally realized he'd lost control and pushed too far, because he didn't say anything as we left. For once, he didn't have a smug response or a lazy shrug. As Riley and I walked out of the house, I felt relieved. Caleb might not be facing real consequences today, but he would eventually. People like him always do, and I wasn't going to be there to catch him when he fell. For the first time after that confrontation, we didn't hear from either Caleb or Linda for several days. To be honest, I think they were both waiting for us to come crawling back, like we always had. That's how things had always worked in our family. Caleb would make a mistake, Mom would cover for him, and the rest of us had to keep our mouths shut for the sake of keeping the peace. But not this time. When we told Logan about what had happened at the house, he actually looked relieved. It's about time, he muttered, shaking his head. Riley and I had made our decision. Linda tried to contact us several times over the next week, first by phone, then by text. But every message was the same. Family doesn't act like this. We need to talk. Caleb is your brother, and while I understand you're angry, this has gone too far. You don't understand the whole story. Let's discuss this over dinner. We ignored her. For the first time, Riley, Logan, and I were all on the same page, and it felt liberating. If Linda wanted to cling to Caleb, that was her choice. He wasn't our responsibility anymore. But Caleb wasn't finished. On a Thursday night, I got a call from an unknown number. I don't usually answer those, but something made me pick up. Hello, Mason. I stayed silent for a moment, half expecting to hear Caleb knocking on my door, but I was still taken aback when I heard his voice. It sounded desperate, not cocky or arrogant. What do you want? I asked flatly. I need to talk to you, Caleb rushed on. It's important. Hard pass. His voice trembled. Mason, please. And I was shocked because Caleb demanded things. He didn't ask for them. Fine. I answered against my better judgment. Not on the phone. Meet me at the depot in an hour. I didn't want to go, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The depot was an old diner we used to frequent as kids, and it felt strangely symbolic, as if Caleb was trying to exploit some shared history to guilt me into listening. When I walked into the depot an hour later and saw Caleb sitting in a booth in the corner, I almost didn't recognize him. He had bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days, and his usually immaculate hair was disheveled. "What do you want, Caleb?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from him. He didn't answer right away, instead staring down at the table, his fingers tapping nervously. "I messed up," he finally said in a low voice. I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, no kidding. No, Mason, I messed up worse than you think." I had never seen Caleb this afraid, and there was something about the way he said it that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Caleb took a deep breath, then exhaled shakily. "I'm in trouble. Bad trouble." I watched panic flash in his eyes for the first time as he glanced up at me. "What kind of trouble?" Caleb ran a trembling hand through his hair. "Debt. I owe a lot of money to a lot of people, Mason. I tried to fix it, but it got out of control." His voice broke as he trailed off. "Avery, what are you saying?" I asked, feeling sick to my stomach. I'd never seen Caleb look so ashamed as he met my eyes. "I needed money," he said. "I thought if I got close to Avery, maybe I could convince her to help. Her family has money, so I thought maybe dash." "You used her." I cut in, stunned. "You manipulated her because of your debt?" Caleb flinched, but pressed on. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't expect her to actually leave Logan for me. Once it started, I couldn't stop it." Caleb hadn't just taken Logan's fiancée because he wanted to win. He'd done it out of desperation. He'd played with Avery's emotions, ruined Logan's life, and torn our family apart to cover up the disaster he'd created for himself. I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just confessed. "Does Mom know?" I asked quietly. "No, and she can't," Caleb said, shaking his head. "If she finds out, she'll dash. Finally see you for who you really are," I finished sourly. "Good. She deserves to know the truth. Please, Mason." Caleb's voice was suddenly begging. "I need your help. I don't have anyone else." "Help you?" I laughed incredulously. "Are you serious? After everything you've done?" "You're my brother," Caleb said. "Family is supposed to stick together. Don't you dare pull the family card," I snapped. "You don't get to hide behind that after what you did to Logan." Caleb stared at me like a drowning man pleading for a life raft. "Please, I can't fix this without you." For the first time in my life, I felt nothing for Caleb. No anger, no hatred, just emptiness. He wasn't my brother anymore. He was just a man who had destroyed every relationship he'd ever had. I stood up. "You need help, Caleb, but it's not going to come from me." Caleb started to protest, but I walked away before he could say anything more. Later that night, Riley, Logan, and I met at my place, and for once, no one was surprised when I told them what Caleb had confessed. "He's always been like this," Logan said quietly. "It just took him this long to fall apart." "Should we tell Mom?" Riley asked after giving it serious thought. I shook my head. "No. She's made her choice. If she wants to think Caleb is perfect, let her." We were done with him. And with her. I had spent my entire life trying to keep this family together. But now I understood that sometimes you have to let things fall apart. For the first time in years, I felt free. Caleb and Linda weren't my burden anymore. Logan turned to Riley and me, a small smile playing on his lips. "You think we'll be okay?" "Yeah," I smiled back. "We'll be okay." And I believed it. For once, I really did. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.